For my latest project, I made Seamwork Magazine's Almada Robe. The pattern comes as a PDF download from their website, which I absolutely love. I know a lot of the older generation of seamstresses doesn't like to really spend the time to construct paper patterns, but I actually really like them because it makes them more accessible, and you don't have to worry about pattern getting damaged. You can always just reprint. It's one of the big pluses that I see in using a PDF pattern. For this pattern, I also actually made my own bias binding, which in the instructions and it advises you to just buy it, but I thought it would be a really cool touch to make my own in a specific color, and I actually made it out of silk. If you don't already know how to make bias binding, I definitely recommend searching YouTube videos about it. It's pretty easy. You just have to make sure to line everything up correctly and that there's no distortion at the beginning and ending of the seams. But if you're using something that's not as slick as the one that I'm using, it sews up fast. The pressing is also a little bit tricky, just a heads up. So with this particular fabric, it was very tricky to work with just because it was very slick. And so I decided to do French seams throughout, which were not part of the original instructions and actually did add quite a lot of time to the construction. But I think it was worth it. If you're thinking about doing bias binding on your particular Almada robe, I would recommend starting out with an initial 3/8 seam allowance and then trimming and then resewing your second line of stitching at 1/4 of an inch. That way you get this really nice, hidden seam, and if you're using a really delicate fabric, it'll look great. There weren't too many French seams in this piece, but the ones that were there were actually pretty long. So, be careful of any warping that might happen at the neckline as you're working, and just know how to shrink the fabric using steam around the neckline in case it does get pulled at all. The instructions for Almada are actually dictate for you to put the bias binding on the inside, kind of a hidden facing along the edge of the robe. But because I used a contrasting bias binding, I really wanted to kind of show it off. So I flipped it out to the outside and used that as a design element. If you'd like to do that for yourself, definitely just follow the directions as is, but just do it on the reverse side. The sleeves themselves were not very complicated, actually. They sewed up really fast, but I did have to do them by hand because I wanted to add an additional design element with the bias binding as a trim. So I stitched it in by hand. During this time, my sewing machine actually decided to start giving me problems, so I really wanted to be able to control that the application was in correctly. I also did a French seam along the inside of the sleeves. Almada is a really quick sew if you use a woven fabric, and it's a definite must-have for just lounging around at the house.